2016 Siouxland Garden Show, and I am Rosanne Plante, and you should be here for container gardening. Is everybody here for container gardening? Yes, okay. Well, today I'm going to talk about the top 10, I call them the 10 commandments for a good container gardener. So hopefully I'll give you some tips. How many people have a pot or two at their house? Okay. Probably the most common container is a hanging basket, and they'll be coming out soon. So Mother's Day, right, we get container baskets, okay? But today I want to talk about some other things you can do with containers. And Dell's Garden Center, right behind us, has generously given us some samples. So if you see anything here you like today, they will be available immediately after my speech at Dell's. So visit Dell's Garden Center for ideas. But the first thing I want to talk about, and I have some live examples, and then we're going to take a look on the screen at some other examples, because unfortunately, it being only April 3rd, we don't have that many real ones out there yet, because of course it's not planting season yet. But we do have some lovely examples here, and then the internet is a plethora of information and ideas. Dell's also has a book that has a lot of good information and samples, and by all means, the containers in my yard every year are not all made up out of my mind. I copy things all the time. So it is perfectly fine to see something on the internet. Or how many people Pinterest? Are there any Pinteresters out there? Okay, you type in container gardening, you will probably be glued to your screen for about 4 days. So just be careful if you do that. So, well, the first thing I want to talk about, or the first commandment, so to speak, is container. And I think we get very stuck in the typical plastic container or the ones you go to the garden center and get. And I want you to think outside the box, because what is so fun with container gardening now is you can put a flower or a plant in any kind of container you find. So here we have some fun examples that are already planted for you. Watering cans are very, very popular right now, and I want you to know you don't have to go and get a brand new watering can. How many people have a shed or a neighbor or go to an auction or a rummage, and there are those really fun old watering cans and they're rusting out already? Have you seen those? Well, those would be perfect, because we'll talk about commandment number 2 in a minute. You need some drainage. So watering cans are fun. This is new, and also Prairie Peddler has some of these. The bird cage, this is a new trend where you find an old bird cage, and I'll talk about how you turn it into a container gardener. But here we just have it. It's popular because the flowers can come out and fill, and what's really neat is by the end of the season, if you do something like, for instance, a begonia or an impatient, it'll actually make a dome. And there are some really neat ways that you can drill holes in certain things, and then you can have like a flower globe by the end of the season. So that's kind of fun. So that's the bird cage. And then this is really popular too, the crystals. I've seen this a lot. I just purchased something similar to this last weekend. But this is fun because it's all in one. It's really easy. All they've done here is just, it's a little cheat. You can just put it in we'll talk about a pot in a pot. Just put it in there. So these are just 3 ideas that we have here at the garden show. You can do anything. So what are some things I've done? Old whiskey barrels, those were popular. They're coming back again. The watering can. How many people have your child's favorite toy left? The Wagon. I have a little duck from my childhood. Take that Wagon, and I'll teach you how to do it. You can make that into a container. Really, truly, and I have some fun examples up here. There are some examples on the internet. Old shoes, old boots, pretty much anything. Baskets are great. How many times have we been to the Goodwill and you see all the baskets on the top of those, racks? Baskets are great too, and you use them a year or two and they get a little icky on the bottom, you throw them away and you have a new container. Milk crates, old Pepsi containers, have you seen those? So really, it's endless what you can do with the container. So once you pick your container, probably the most important commandment on this list is the next one, and that is drainage, okay? So we're gonna peek on the bottom here, and you're going to see that there is one hole on the bottom, okay, one hole. If you buy something pre-made like this, the first thing I always look for is there a drainage hole? And if we take a look, there is a very nice drainage hole plus a plug on this, okay? Now, why is this important? Well, if you water a plant, a flower, a vegetable, and it has no way to drain, what's going to happen, it's going to get wet feet, I like to call it. The roots are going to get very wet. Now, does anybody here like to have wet feet for more than a few minutes? No. Well, neither do pots or flowers. So what happens is the roots never drain, and they begin to decay and rot. And if you've ever watered a flower and it just seems to get sicker and sicker and sicker, I encourage you to check the drainage holes. How many people get the poinsettia at Christmas and it's in the foil wrapping? Okay, and you water it, and after a while it doesn't look so good. I tell people, lift it up out of the foil, and you're probably going to see what? About an inch or two of water. And so that's my number one poinsettia trick for you, is to check it. So how do you drill holes? Well, you can just do it with a how I've done it, a old nail and a hammer in something metal, a drill. Now you want to be careful. There's lots of very cute ceramic pots out there. And the first thing I always look at is their drainage holes in the ceramic pot. If there are not, you need to get a ceramic bit for your drill. If you just take a drill bit and just start in, you're going to shatter your container. So you don't want to do that. Now, the other trick you can do, if you have a container that doesn't have any drainage, and let's say it's an antique and you don't want to take that chance, you can do what I call a fake set. And that is, you literally put your plant in something else with the drainage holes, and then you place that in your container. Now, this requires you, of course, when you're watering, to do what? To take it out, or to make sure you have a way to drain it. So, but you can do what I call a fake set. So if you have something cute, you don't want to drill a hole in it, that's something you can do. Now, how many holes do you drill? Well, you know, it depends on the size. Something like this, 1 or 2 is fine. Something bigger, like say a several gallon container, you might want to do, I do it at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. Probably the best experience I ever had to teach me about drainage holes was when I did my Master Gardener project 11 years ago. It's a long time ago. And I had 2 extremely large, about 4.5 foot tall, they were pots in front of the entrance of the assisted living. They were also probably about 5 feet across. So these were huge urn type of pots. I planted them on the same day. It was a true science project. On the same day, with the same sort of soil, with the same plants. Of course, they were mirror images of each other. I checked one, and there were drainage holes. So what did I do? I assumed they both had drainage holes. I should never have done that. I planted them. I began to water them. After about 3 weeks, one was doing very well. The other one was struggling. Thought, well, maybe it was the light. Maybe there was an animal digging in it. Another week went by, more watering, flourish, failure to thrive over here. I finally thought, maybe I should check the drainage holes. There were none. I had the maintenance man come out with a drill. I had him drill 8 holes in the side, about 3 inches up, because it was such a big pot we couldn't do it on the bottom. As he drilled, it was like a waterfall. The water just gushed out. So that was a good lesson. Within about 2 weeks, they had caught up with each other. So be sure that no matter what you do, that you have drainage. So that's number 2. Now, number 3 is your soil. And I'm a big proponent of buying some good soil. I'm not supposed to endorse any particular type, so I won't. But there's lots of soils out there that have the slow release fertilizer, and it says good for 90 days, okay? I do endorse buying one of the many brands of fine soils out there. Now, here's the other thing. If you're gonna do a lot of pots, and I do about 50 to 60 a year now, the dirt can get a little bit expensive. So I also encourage you for drainage that if you have a very large pot, let's say that this was all filled in, you do not have to put soil from the top to the bottom. What you can do is put a layer of what I call a drainage area, and you can use lots of things. You can use packing peanuts. Anybody have packing peanuts around, right? Styrofoam packing peanuts. You can go ahead and use, anytime we get styrofoam, I get excited at our house because I'm like, oh, we're going to save that. And I just break it up or cut it up, put it in the bottom. You can also use, you know those little black containers that you get your seedlings in, you know, that you throw away? You just smash those up. Somebody told me that last year. Smash those up. They fill up a lot of space, but they're very light. But you want what I call like an air cushion. And what that does is, 1, you don't need to fill this all up with dirt. Number 2, that gives it drainage. And number 3, if you have a huge pot and it's only half full of dirt, what is it probably not going to be? It's not going to be heavy, right? How many people have ever filled up a giant pot and then you're like, now I have to move this sucker, right? Yes. Okay. So that's another thing that's kind of nice. So with your soil, what I recommend, if it's a pot if you used it last year and you cleaned out the pot, you pulled up the dead stuff and you put your pot away in the garage or the shed, I go ahead and I dump it over, and I have a big tarp out in my yard. I dump it out, and what I do is I combine half the old soil after I put my layer down, half the old soil with brand new fresh soil that has that fertilizer in. I make a mix and then I put it in. If you do all new soil, you have to be careful that it's not too much for the plant, just so you know that. So I like to do a mix of the two types of soils. Do I do any fertilizer at that point? The answer is no, especially if you've already done the soil that has the weed and feed. Now, do you think it lasts 90 days? I have no. No, it does not. No. I always laugh about that because people say, oh, I'm done. And I say, well, sort of. If you want a lot of blooming, you're not done yet. So that leads me to the fourth thing, which is fertilizer, which you don't need right then. You don't need right then, but you will later. Now, what kind of fertilizer do I use? Well, what I like to use is something that the Prairie Peddler taught me. A couple years ago, we went to their greenhouse and they had these gorgeous pots in August. And you know how you go into the greenhouse and everything is gorgeous and lush here in about a month, right? You buy some basket or a container and you go home and about 6 weeks later, maybe it doesn't look so lush. Well, that's because they have a secret at the greenhouse. And the secret is, and it comes in many forms, bloom buster, bloomer. I've seen it all sorts. But what you want to do is you want to look at the fertilizer. It's a liquid, soluble fertilizer. You mix it up. It's kind of a turquoisey blue. And what you want is that middle number. You know how fertilizer has 3 numbers? You want the middle number to be as high as possible. Okay, and that middle number is what causes the plant to grow. And I have seen it as high as 62, and the higher the better. Normally, if you buy one, it's about 20 or 30. If you get the bloom buster, that middle number, okay, is what makes your flowers bloom. Now, after about 6 weeks, I start every week to what I tell people. I give my flowers vitamins, and I go out there. You will literally water your flower, and within 24 hours, you will see a difference, okay? You'll see more blooms, you'll see more foliage, and that's the key. And then I do that every week. I am careful though, you want to not get it on the leaves because it is fertilizer. When it's very hot, it burns it. It can give it like almost a chemical burn. And you don't want to do it more than every 7 to 10 days because what will happen is you will have incredible root growth and it will get root bound before the end of the season. Now you'll know if you did this right in September and October when you go to dump your flowers. Literally, I have gone to dump my flowers and it comes out like a Jell-O pop. There are so many roots wrapped around those packing peanuts that I can't get it to break apart. So it comes out just like a mold. That way you know you've done it right. So that's fertilizer. All right, so we have our soil, and now we're going to plant. So how do you select your plants? Well, I encourage people to just kind of go with what looks pretty to them. I could tell you to use the color wheel. I could tell you could have a theme. I've done all these things in my yard, but I think something that's the most fun is you just go and you just find something that you think is pretty, okay? Now, I want you to know in a container, you can do anything. Can you do vegetables? Yes. Can you do herbs? Yes. Can you do flowers? Yes. Can you do succulents, which is what these are? Yes. You can pretty much put anything in a pot that you can put in the ground. Can you put tulips in the ground? Does anybody know? Or in a pot? Can you do that? If you do it in the fall, absolutely. You can put them to bed and water them about every 6 weeks. If you can remember to go out there, you put them out and they will bloom in a pot. So absolutely, you can do anything in a pot. So when you plant, the 2 things that are important though, and that I've learned this through some hard experiences, we want our containers to look pretty, right? Isn't this lovely? It's nice and full. But what you don't know is this is probably about 2 months of growth, okay? So when you're planting and you want it to look like this, remember that what you plant is going to grow. How many people have ever gone and bought furniture and taken it home and gone, oh my, this furniture is huge for our house, right? Same applies to your flowers. So I have to always remember this. You want to think ahead and say, how big is this flower going to get? You don't want a crowd. What happens is if you crowd, guess what happens? Somebody either dies, or I have literally had flowers push each other out. I've literally had them grow and they're shoving one of their roommates out. So remember, when you plant, you don't want to have too many, and then you want to make sure you have good roommates. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at the little tags, anybody look at the little tags when you buy things? Those are your information. And you will see that they say sun, no sun, shade, part shade. Do you think it's a good idea to put two roommates together that are shade and sun? You are never going to have a happy apartment here, okay? You put it in the shade will be happy and the sun will be sad. Put it in the sun will be happy, the shade will die. So be sure that you put like flowers together with like flowers, and for the most success, Now the other tip that I have, and this is getting to be more popular, is the thriller, filler, and spiller. That's the other thing I want to talk about. So this is the best example of that, and then we'll look at some over there as well. Right here, when you do a pot, we have a thriller, which is our tall one, okay? What are some thrillers in other containers? Well, you'll see the traditional spike. You see those at the garden centers. What's very popular too as well is prairie grass. Our native grasses are very popular. So you want to have something that's going to go up. That's going to catch your eye. It's going to make the arrangement look bigger. Cannas are great. Calla lilies are great. All of those are good choices. Then you want something that's going to fill out. Okay, fill out the area, because what we like is a nice, full arrangement. So shorter plants, you can make sure that your flowers are that are not going to droop. So you can do anything from petunias that are not trailing petunias to, I think one that I use a great deal is impatiens, if there is shade, because they get nice and bushy and they look very cute. And then that will fill out your container. And then what I really like too is something that's going to spill out. Now your spiller can spill either from here, like a waterfall, or it can be something like this that shoots out and falls down. So some popular spillers are vining flowers, licorice flowers. What else have I used? I've used fern, asparagus fern. It's also very pretty. And of course, ivy is a very traditional one. So your thriller, your filler, and your spiller. So you don't have to, though. I tell people if you want more of a rounded pot, that's fine. You know, it's just an idea. You can mix those up. So after we have our plants selected and we have put them in, okay, and we also have figured out if we want to do a thriller, filler, spiller, or a more round arrangement, after you have them all planted, then you'll want to figure out where you want to place them, and you want to water immediately. Now, how important is watering? It's very important for a container. Containers here's the deal. The smaller the container, the more you'll have to water. If it's very hot, I've had to water small containers 3 times a day. The bigger the container, the more soil, the longer that the moisture will hold. Now, I have a lot of questions about moisture control soil. Has anybody ever used moisture control soil? How were your results? You liked it, okay? Anybody else? You liked it as well? Right. Well, what it does is it actually saves some of the water and then distributes it later. Now, I have had mixed results, and I think that that's because maybe I didn't use enough of it. Sometimes people use too much or too little, so it either doesn't do it enough, or if you have too much, it holds too much water. But it is an option, and what I encourage people to do for all flowers is, if you say, I don't know if this needs to be watered, it's the finger test, right? Okay, and the finger test is what? The top may look dry, but if you put your finger in an inch or two and that soil is moist, you don't need to water, do you? And one big amateur mistake that I made too was, oh, it looks dry. I think I'm just gonna water the heck out of this, and then it gets waterlogged. The opposite is also true. When you water, you want to make sure you water deeply, right? Because if you water deeply, and how do you water deeply? Well, you water it till what? The moisture comes out of the drainage hole. When you water deeply, what does that do? It forces the roots down. The roots want to reach down. So it's important to water deeply, but not too much as well. So we are on number 8 now. Number 8. So just to recap, we have, if you're taking notes, we have number 1, we have our container, right? Number 2, our drainage holes. Number 3, we pick a good soil. Number 4, select your plants. Don't crowd, and make sure you have good roommates. Number 5, if you want to, you do your thriller, filler, and spiller. Number 6 is water, and we talked about fertilization, number 7. So that leaves us to number 8, and that is deadheading. How many people know how to deadhead? Anybody deadhead out here? Okay. So deadhead is, and I don't have a flower here, but I can give an example of this. This is actually, for this pretty little thing, this succulent, this is the flower on it, okay? So after a while, and you'll see that we're going to have a little bloom. So after a while, this is going to fall. Petunias are great, right? Petunias are pretty. You buy them, and then you have all those little little droopy heads. So deadheading is simply what? Taking that bloom off. So on this, I would wait till it was spent, and then I would just take, either you can take a little scissors or just your finger, and you can just what? Pop this off. Now, there's a couple reasons we deadhead. Number 1, it's just kind of ugly, right? We don't like those ugly flowers on there. So we take that off. But number 2 is it makes the plant redirect energy. So when a plant grows a flower, what are they really doing? Well, the flower is the beginning of a seed, right? If we let that go long enough, it would start the seed. Do we want seeds or do we want flowers, ladies and gentlemen? We want more. I want flowers. I want 1,000 blooms on my stuff. Okay. So if you take that away, what you're doing is you're telling the plant, hey, make another flower. So yes, it's time consuming, especially if you have one of those great big, I had this big petunia basket last year, and every morning, guess what? I'm walking the dog, and I'm out there picking picking the spent bulbs. But if you do it, you will have much more bloom and much prettier results. And then if you're doing your fertilizer, it really does work well. So deadheading is great. It's also a great stress reliever if you've had a bad day. Just go out there and pop all those flower heads off. People used to be able to tell when I had a bad day at my old job. Just pop those heads off. Okay. Number 9 is have some fun with your containers. So you have all these containers, and I encourage people to decorate, because you can never have too many doodads, right? So, especially if you come to my house, I have a lot of doodads. So if you have this great pot, maybe you want to personalize it, put something in that represents your house or your garden. So once again, I stole some stuff from Dell's. Here's a little puppy dog. I know there's some pet lovers out there, Christy, right? So this could be Stella. It could be Stella. This is a little globy dog, and I just put stuff right in the middle. So if you didn't pick a thriller flower, guess what? You can buy a thriller if you forgot, okay? So you can buy a thriller. So I like this. This one's also very cute. It's a little pig, okay? You can do themes. You can put 3 or 4 pots together and do a little theme. I have something that is little Chinese symbols for peace and harmony. I put those together. So don't forget to decorate. Don't forget to decorate. You can make your own little decorations. I know some kids love like those pinwheels. And these, once again, they don't have to be expensive. The Dollar Tree, lots of fun little things that you can put in your pots. So, and then the last thing before we go over to look at some slides is to group your plants. Now, I think probably traditionally we like to put pots on our front porch, a hanging basket on our deck. But I encourage people to put plants anywhere that you would like to draw in color. If you want to create a garden room, maybe for a special occasion. When you have containers, you can move them, obviously. And so I do something called curating at my house, which means I just move stuff around and change it all the time. So if I put stuff together for one holiday, maybe I'll have them grouped a certain way on the porch. If I'm going to have a garden walk, I'm going to put them what? I'm going to move them to where I'm going to have a lot of traffic. If you're going to have an event and you want everybody to have more space, you want to expand, you can put them in corners to make the illusion of a room. So containers are very versatile. I like to change my containers up as well, and things that are in the back I pull forward after some things have spent. And I also want you to know not to be afraid to have a container for maybe only a month or 6 weeks. I have 2 pots that are stone cement on my front, and I call them the rotating containers. So in about a month, about 3 weeks now, I'm going to put pansies in them, okay? If you have pansies, those are cool weather flowers, right? Are they going to be happy come July? No, they are not. No, they're going to last year they lasted a while. They're going to just lay their little heads down and die. So that's okay, because by July, then all the flowers are on sale, and guess what I do? I just go buy new ones, right? So then I get some nice red geraniums for 4th of July, and I whip those pansies out, and I put my geraniums in, right? And they look good, and then I say fall comes, and with the ushering of fall, you see what? All the mums, right? And then I whip those geraniums out, guess what? Put those mums in. And then last year I even got creative and didn't want to give my containers up. So when the mums died back, I cut them back, and I even did gourds and some Indian corn in front of my house. So containers don't have to be flowers. You can fill them with things from your garden as well. And if you come to my house right now, I do cheat once in a while. You know, you have to fake it till you make it sometimes. And if you come to my house now, I have lovely forever daffodils in my containers. Because of course we can't grow anything. And at the Christmas season, and I don't want you to forget your pots at Christmas time, if you want to leave a few out, many of the garden centers represented here and in town, they sell greenery that you can buy, and there's classes. You can make your own containers with live greens that will stay evergreen all season. So I had some lovely evergreen with some fake poinsettias and some Christmas balls, and we had those for the holidays. So the only thing is, be careful, because once you put them in the soil and it freezes, you're kind of stuck with it. So we had Christmas till Valentine's Day at our house because I couldn't get those little suckers out. So, containers are as versatile as you are, and I tell people, if you don't like what you've planted, change it. You know, you're not stuck with it forever. I also think the containers really fit everybody's lifestyle. If you rent, you can have containers. If you have health issues, you can have containers because you don't have to go out into the garden and kneel down. You can also have containers that are put in raised container beds. I've seen some really nice examples of containers that are up, so if you don't want to bend over. So just really be as creative as you want and have fun with it, because that's what gardening is about. So, all right, so once again, if you need some inspiration, all you have to do is either Pinterest or type in garden containers, and you can find just a plethora of ideas. I like this picture up here that's highlighted because it shows what somebody has done. So here we have a typical deck or patio, and you'll see that there are several flowers here along the back. They've created a wall effect with it. Containers are great to cover up ugly things. How many people have something ugly in their yard? Well, put a container in front of it. Nobody will see it anymore. It's also a way to draw your eye up as well. So here we have pots all along a wall. We have a house plant that has come out. I know some people have house plants they bring out and they let them be on the deck during the growing season, and they take them in. Here is something that I like. Here's a canna. Can you do cannas in a pot? Absolutely. Okay, and you can start them in the house right now so you can get that extra bloom faster. And then we have some real typical, these are marigolds down here, but I like how they've grouped this, because what it does is it extends and it welcomes people up the stairs, okay? Martha Stewart, I think, was the one who said your front porch should always be the most inviting, right? So I think the front porch is very pretty to have, or your front stoop with some greenery on the front. It welcomes people. We scroll down, we'll see some more examples. This is a good example right here of the thriller, the filler, and the spiller. So here we have some daisies. We have some filler of green, and then we have, here are some mini petunias. And you'll want to look, if you've ever seen the wave petunias, that means they're going to flow, okay? So wave petunias do just that. They wave down. So they're very, very pretty. The only thing about wave petunias you do have to be careful of is that they don't get too leggy. And that's another thing I should mention, is if you have somebody in a container and you just think they're getting a little out of control, do not be afraid to cut them right back, okay? Here's the deal. If you cut back a flower, guess what? Instead of being leggy, it's going to do what? It's going to bush out. And so people often have seen me chopping away at my containers, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, come back in 2 weeks and see the difference. So don't be afraid if something doesn't look right, then you just snip it back a bit. Here's another example of the thriller. Here we have a big spike, okay? Another fabulous spiller is a sweet potato vine. Anybody do sweet potato vines? They are one of my favorites, yes. They're a little more expensive to buy individually, but you get bang for your buck. And here is something I learned too. You don't need many in a pot, do you? I once put... Yeah, oh wait, yes. Yep, and you can let them grow and get very long, or once again, that's when I kind of rein back because I want it to be big and fluffy. But if you do a pretty good sized pot, you really only need one, because they do get pretty wide on you. Here's another, so that's a good example of that. See, we have the thriller, we have the sweet potato vine here, which you're actually using as more of a filler, and then we have, it looks like licorice here as our spiller, okay? Now be careful about your spillers that they don't get too leggy, because then that doesn't look good. I actually like them to only spill to the bottom of the container. Otherwise, if they're kind of laying on the ground, it doesn't always look very, very clean, so. Okay. There we go. I want to point this one out here, and it's really fun. What is that? It is a bird bath, okay? Now, bird baths are really fun, and you might say, okay, how do I do a bird bath? Well, if it's plastic, you can drill your holes in it. If it's cement, like this one appears to be, you can do succulents in it, or a cactus, something that doesn't need quite as much drainage. But this is something that's really taking off, is using bird baths for other things, like butterfly gardens, where you lay things out for the butterflies. I have a cute pattern where you make an old bird bath into a butterfly habitat, where you put rocks and oranges and some water in there. So you can do that with a container. But if you have an old bird bath, doesn't look so good, you can do something like this with it, which is kind of fun. And then one thing I forgot to cover was, if you do pick something that has a lot of holes in it, how you do that is you can cheat. I don't know if you can see this, but there is some holder there. Okay, that's that. You can buy this at any garden center, and you can use old burlap or peat moss, any of those things. But what they did was they made an insert right here, and then that catches the water. Another thing that I do to line things is just black landscaping paper. Has anybody ever used that? You can buy a roll very, very inexpensively at Menards, and you can take it and you can put it in things, and then you just cover it up with a little sphagnum moss, and then your soil is in that. And then guess what? You don't have to do any drainage holes. Why? Because the water's just going to come out of that. So I saw a really cute arrangement with old shoes and old purses where they did that, and they just put the black paper in there and just sliced a few holes in the bottom for drainage, and it worked out well. So bird baths are another idea. Here is the raised garden one that I talked about, where you do containers. This is also another fun one right here. They've taken old lattice work. I've also seen old ladders used to display your pots. Now, the only thing I want to say about that is, think of where you're putting it and what you're going to do if a storm comes. Because lots of these ideas are very cute until the storm comes through, and then all of them blow down. So be just a little bit careful about that. Also, don't want to forget about our fences. Here is one with fencing. Can you hang things on decks and fences containers? Absolutely. Just make sure that you have bolting and make sure it's securely on. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure that it's firmly on what I would consider the I-beam or the main parts of the post. If you do window boxes, I encourage people to make sure that you have strong straps this way. There are some that have very narrow ones, and if you put that on your deck and then you put heavy soil and then plants, guess there is tilting. So make sure that you extend that down. Cable ties are great. Does anybody use cable ties? I use cable ties for everything. So you want to secure something, go ahead and use your cable ties. And then here, the last one I want to show you is an example of the toy. There's an old radio flyer, okay? You can do that. I have seen actual flower beds. Have you seen where people have taken old mattresses and beds? I've seen a toilet. Probably not at my house would I do that, but I have seen that. I do have one thing at my house I'm going to work on, and I have an old Ringer washing machine that was gifted to me by the people who bought our house, our old owners, and I am going to go and plant in this Ringer washing machine this year, so that will be fun. So we just have to figure out how to get it out of the backyard and get holes in it, so that's the next thing. But that's another great example if you could take one of your children's old toys and turn it in to something. And here, this one would also be a good idea for a fairy garden. And let's not forget our smallest containers, which are our fairy gardens, which are very popular. And we have lots of vendors with fairy gardens. And so just remember with fairy gardens, though, that they are not very deep, so you have to watch what kind of plants you buy. And of course, once again, you don't want to put it out in the open. I know people have put a fairy garden out in the open, and the squirrels have had a great time taking the little toys and distributing them all over the yard. So just be careful about that. So with those examples, I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I have some pots that I pull in the garage in the winter. What do you do about this? Do you put new soil in those, or what do you do about it?
I do. Did you clean them out? Did you take all the old stuff out, or did you just kind of put them in?
No, I mean, like if the plants overwinter in the garage, and then bring them back out.
Okay, but did you take the old plants themselves out? You did not. Okay. Are they perennial? Are they going to come back, or were they annual? They were perennial?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's perennial, I'm very careful. If it's a perennial that's going to come back, an annual is once a year, perennial comes back. What I do is I very carefully try to take some of the old soil out. Just put a new maybe inch or two of the good soil with the fertilizer, and then I do a deep, probably about a month in, I do a lot of the liquid fertilizer. So you don't want to mess that up, because that's gotten used to being in there, and it would just be like if you went and dug it out of the yard, it wouldn't be happy. So, and I would at this point make sure it's out. I know it's chilly, but if it's a perennial, it would be out anyway, if it's zone specific. And so I pulled a bunch of my pots out, and they were out actually in the blizzard, and they're fine. Because if you think about it, if that flower was outside, it would be getting that, it needs that moisture, and it needs that wake up. So that's what I would do. Get them out right away today. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Did you do the same thing with geraniums? I brought geraniums in through the winter.
Uh-huh.
Want to set them back out. They're nice and green right now.
That's great. What I would do is, today would be a great day to set them out, but only when it's nice. Because if you forget about them, all your hard work will be gone. So remember, they got nice and cozy in your warm house. So when you put them out, it's kind of like plant boot camp, a little bit at a time. So you put them out, make sure it's nice. You leave them out. What you want to do is kind of gauge the nighttime temperatures. You want to leave, as the temperature goes up, you'll want to leave them out a little bit longer, and that will acclimate them from inside to outside. And then by the time the night temperatures are about 50, you can start leaving them out. But it should take you about 2 weeks to do that. But on a very nice day like today, I would actually get them out, get them watered, get them fertilized, and you might want to snip them back a little bit, cut them back, because have they gotten a little leggy in the house at all?
They're really not too bad.
Okay. So that's good.
When I put them out, I had to cut them out. So it has back.
So you cut them back when you brought them in? And that's perfect. If you do that, you have less cleanup in the spring. So yeah, I would just cut off anything that doesn't look, pretty, and start putting them out. Absolutely.
So do you think they'll bloom like they did last year?
Yes, absolutely. My grandma did that. She dug everything up. Before Walmart and all these places you could go, she had geraniums she brought in and took in and back out 4 and 5 years. My grandma was the only person who could have a poinsettia at Christmas, plant it in the ground, let it grow all summer, dig it up, bring it back to the house. I have yet to accomplish that feat. I get sick of the poinsettia by like May. So yes, absolutely. Now, an annual like that, I'm assuming they were annuals, okay, they will eventually die. They have a lifespan just like anything else. So I had a hibiscus tree one year I couldn't part with, and it went in and out 3 times, but by the 3rd year, it was elderly. And it did not make it through my 3rd summer. And I did see a reduction in blooms, but I think I have got 2 years out of geraniums. I think you'll be fine this year, maybe not next year, because remember, they are biologically programmed to only live 1 year. So, but if you can pull it off, you go for it.
Just fertilize it then?
Fertilize the heck out of it. Yep. Because remember, it's elderly. It's an older plant, and it's genetic makeup. So, very good question. Anything else? Oh yes, tulip bulbs, yes. Tulip bulbs are tricky. All right, tulip bulbs, here's what I have found from experience. If they are what I call old-fashioned, heirloom, salt of the earth tulip bulbs, I know people that they have the same bulbs, they come up year after year. What you don't know is they're not the same bulb. They are generations of the bulb. The bulb, they reproduce under your soil. So what you see this year, 2 years later, that's that next generation of bulbs. The oldest and those kind of bulbs are the best. Now, if you go, like me, and you buy sometimes fancy, have you ever bought these very fancy bulbs? You can spend as much as $100 on a tulip bulb. I don't know if you know, yes. Oh, yes. Those very fancy hybrids, 1 year for sure, maybe 2, they're not as hardy. They're just not as hardy. And then of course you have critters. I planted 95 tulip bulbs last year. I had 45, and the gopher had a really good lunch one day. When I tell people, if you want a beautiful display every year, you better plant them every year, and that's what I do. Don't count on, if you get some to come back, count it as a win, but otherwise, there are a number of things. The animals, if you have a wet fall, they'll rot. If you have a wet spring, they rot. If you have too cold of a winter, they can sometimes get too freeze-dried. If you have too warm of a winter, they start to sprout early. There are so many factors that tulip bulbs are tricky. Orange City, the Tulip Festival coming up, they plant those every year. Every year those are new tulips. Yes. Yes. No, I've had trouble with, I really like to plant them in a pot. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And you do that in the fall just like you do it in your ground, and they're very easy. The other thing about tulips is the closer together, the better off you are. You know how they tell you to space them 6 to... No, don't do that. I want a lot of flowers all next to each other. I just throw that direction right in the garbage. I just put them right next to each other. Yes, when you put them in the pot, absolutely. What happens is you have your bloom, and I hope everybody knows that when you have tulips, you want to make them look, you want to wait till they're ugly, because you want that foliage. You don't want to cut down a tulip until it's completely on the ground, because it's drawing that strength back into the bulb for next year. So what I have done with my pot is it's pretty and then it's not so pretty, so I put it in the backyard where I exile my ugly flowers, till I get them pretty again. Let them die down, cut them off, another month, and usually about June or July, I put the pot in the shed, and then I don't actually dig them out until the fall, until I want to move them in another place, or I just leave them. So, and then I dig them out and put them somewhere. Right. So you just throw them in the back of your shed. Actually, after you cut that top off, just put them in the back. Yep. Yeah. You don't have to put them anywhere warm or anything. Yep. They need to be cold. You can also cheat and put bulbs in the freezer or in the refrigerator, and you can force them. That's a whole nother talk, though. What? It depends on the bulb. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 2 months. Oh, yeah. It really depends on the bulb. Yeah. Like I said, that's a whole nother talk. But it's fun to force a bulb. It's just tricky. Any other, all good questions, yes.
Do you have any preferences over fertilizers, like your fertilizer stick or granules or liquid?
I do. I love the fertilizer that you mix up. And what it is it's usually, they give you a scoop. It's 2 scoops to a standard watering can, and that's 2 gallons. So what it is a scoop per gallon. I use tepid water, just barely warm, that dissolves it. And I do a watering can. I am not a fan of the spray thing, they show you that. You know why? Because then first of all, you're wasting fertilizer, you're wasting product, but you're also spraying all of this. And remember, if it's hot, what's going to happen? It's going to burn. So it takes a little bit more time, but I use a watering can because I can get that watering can nozzle, right down there. And I want you to know too that mix-up fertilizer you can use if you have a container with a tomato in it, a vegetable, herbs, anything. That is safe. That fertilizer is safe, and you will have the best vegetables, the most tomatoes you've ever seen in a container. And I use it in the garden as well sometimes. So my preference is it's a granule, and then I mix it up. Though I've had luck with fertilizer stakes in the house, but outside I like the mixed up stuff. Yes. How do I keep the bunnies away? Well, get a dog, which she has already. Marigolds, a lot of rabbits, I plant marigolds, they don't like that. Also think opportunity. If you have stuff low, they're going to munch. If it's a bigger pot, they're not going to, unless they're Olympic bunnies, they're going to stop. So, something like this, I'm going to be able to get into. My bigger pots, they don't get into it. I had a low pot down on the ground. It was like a razor cane. So think about that. Yeah, the bigger the pot, that I just think physically, making it impossible for them to get to is a good idea. Oh, yes. There's lots of things you could try, but I think one of the best things, and it's not very pretty, but it works, are 5-gallon buckets, old, that you get joint compound or whatever in. I had rabbit problems one year at my old house, and every day I came home, my peppers were gone. Oh, I was so frustrated. Somebody said, get 5-gallon buckets, cut the bottom out, put it over it till the plant's big enough. And then it protected it also. The tomatoes, I did that, the peppers, it protected it from storms. And then when the plant got big, you just lift that bucket off. And by then, if the rabbit wants to chew on the bottom leaf, no big deal. You've got a lot of plants. So I did 5-gallon buckets. You could paint them look like minions.
Rabbits do eat marigolds.
Do they?
I have eaten mine one year, and they eat the tall ones, the like the African ones.
Yeah.
They eat those, the blues off the top, and they also eat the little yellow ones on the bottom. They chew them.
They chew those. I've had good luck with marigolds. You must have Olympic rabbits. They must be very hungry.
They are. No, they have.
They have them. Yeah. And a dog is helpful too. Estella's a good watch dog. And sometimes simply moving them, you don't know where the nest is. Sometimes it's an opportunity. If there's a salad bar right there, they're going to go there. If you make the plants a little bit harder, once they realize there's nothing there, they're going to look elsewhere for food. So I've moved stuff sometimes too, till they get desensitized to that and they go somewhere else. And be sure you don't put out I know some people put food out for the bird. If you attract them too, then they come as well. I say don't put food out if you don't want a bunch of critters right there. So, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming. And if you would like to plant a spring container, this will continue. I'll be doing a hands-on activity at 12:45 over in the Make and Take area. So I welcome you if you'd like to come do that. We have a spring container that you can plant, and I will show you some of these things hands-on, and then you can take it home with you today. So enjoy the show and enjoy the beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a bit cold in the dark places.